Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Chrissy Hodges, advocate for OCD. This is my memoir, Pure OCD, The Invisible Side of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder. Talks all about my lived experience as I struggled when I was a teenager, adolescent, and into my therapy journey. I'm also a certified peer support specialist, working all over the world with individuals to support them as they're looking toward getting treatment and working toward recovery. We can also provide referrals to therapists anywhere in the world to help you if you are seeking or looking to get treatment at this time. NoCD, NOCD is an app. You can find forums with other people who have OCD to connect, and they also provide telehealth, ERP through telehealth in many, many places around the world. So check them out at treatmyocd.com. I have a very interesting topic I want to talk to you about today, and I want to try not to get in the academic weeds of this, but I have found something really interesting in one of my classes. As you may or may not know, right now I'm in grad school. I'm getting a master's in psychology, looking to see where I want to go next, how I can contribute to the community in a different direction, maybe research. I'm really interested in the experience, the lived experience of OCD and all of the different avenues that we may have in order to find some research to answer some of those questions that are just hanging out there that we don't know the answer to. Now, this is one thing that I discovered this week in one of my classes, and I have just been over the moon excited, and I really wanted to share this with you. This is a little, okay, just so you know, I don't have any sort of theory, proof, anything about this, but it's just a concept that as I was reading about it, I could relate to it, and I feel like you'll be able to relate to it. I'm actually going to meet with one of my professors to talk about possibly turning this into something regarding my capstone project, which could or could not relate to doing some research, probably just correlational research, not experimental, but would love to get your input if this interests you. Now, this is talking about self-esteem. I suffer with almost chronic self-esteem issues, always have. I would say they're probably resolving some in the last few years of my life for various reasons, but ever since the onset of OCD, I really have suffered with self-esteem in general, externally, internally, everything. And I hear this a lot in the community. I hear it from people a lot that self-esteem is something that is just so difficult to grow or foster or master. Now, there's a lot of different opinions on self-esteem, so I don't want to jump into that. You know, there's the myth of self-esteem, and is self-esteem tied to how other people think about you, or is self-esteem tied to your own self? Whatever. But today we're just going to focus on something that I read about that I think may help you understand why self-esteem can seem so unattainable. Again, it might feel a little in the weeds, but I'm going to try not to get... Okay, so I'm in social psychology. We're talking about causal attributions. Okay, so this concept means how we attribute cause when we're looking at a situation. Okay, so if your best friend or a family member, you call them up and they kind of act like a butthead to you. You know, you're like, oh, hey, how you doing? Or whatever, they're grumpy and they're like, I have to go right now. You're going to attribute that behavior to something, right? You could attribute it to they're just an asshole. And sometimes that's the case. Or you could attribute it to, wow, I wonder what's going on. They must be having a bad day, situational, right? And you as an individual get to judge that. And we judge that about ourselves as well. I'm driving down the road, someone cuts me off. One day, I might just be like, whoa, that dude's in a hurry, no big deal. The next day, I might be like, asshole, right? So maybe it's, my behavior is situational. Maybe it's just, whatever the case, that's what that means. Well, in the course of learning about this, I came across attributions for self-blame. So self-blame attributions. And the work that I came across is called Janoff Bolmar. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This, when I read it, I just felt this explosion inside of myself being able to relate to this. In this work, there are two types of self-blame. There is behavioral self-blame and there is categorical self-blame. What do we mean when we talk about self-blame? If something happens to us or something in our life happens and it's negative, we tend to adopt one of these ways of self-blame. That happened to me because X, Y, and Z. How many of you in your OCD journey have contemplated, why did this happen to me? I mean, it's the first question we ask ourselves. We then at times become obsessed with the circumstances that surrounded the first theme or intrusive thought that showed up. And sometimes we even go as far to say, if only I hadn't have watched that TV show, if only I hadn't talked to that person, if only I hadn't had this thought, then this would have never happened to me. Well, okay, first of all, when we say that, I understand it. It's almost an automatic response. But when we say that, we're right there, we're attributing blame to ourselves. If only I didn't. I mean, when I had the fear of vomiting, somebody else barfed in the classroom. It wasn't my fault. And it wasn't even that guy's fault. He was sick. It was just a situation that occurred that triggered my anxiety. But my brain then went into this need to know why, which is why I developed religious scrupulosity. The only thing I could latch onto is that I was being punished by God. And that is the reason why I was having anxiety. Okay, so I found an explanation when I was 8, held on to that for the next 12 years, and look how that worked out for me. But at least I can attribute it to something. Now, unfortunately, even if I feel like it, let me go back to this behavioral and categorical. So all of us, most of us, I can't speak for everybody, get into that pattern at some point in our journey. And what I have learned is that this is a reflection on our self-esteem. If we could assign some sort of blame, that would be behavioral, right? So again, if this is a good one. When I had the fear of demon possession, I had watched The Exorcist. So to some degree, I could say, oh my goodness, I caused this intrusive thought. I now know that OCD caused intrusive thoughts, but then I could say I caused it, and therefore I'm now being punished with this inability to let go of these intrusive thoughts, which turned into compulsions, and I couldn't sleep for months or whatever. But I could say to myself, see, look, I did this. This was my fault. Now, how that impacts my self-esteem is actually more positive than just all of a sudden out of the blue, I get a fear of demon possession, because now I have some sort of control moving forward. Okay, I chose to watch that film, even though I knew it was going to be scary. Check. That means this happened because of my action. Check. In the future, I won't do that. Avoidance. Because it makes me feel this way. Check. It doesn't impact my self-esteem negatively, even though the outcome was negative, because I can take blame and have somewhat of control over it moving forward. I won't do that again, so therefore I won't get triggered. Is that true? No. Well, it's not true because we can't control OCD in that way, but it can be true in regards to self-esteem. Okay, so that's behavioral, right? Behavioral self-blame. This is why we search, and this is why a lot of times people have less self-esteem issues when they attribute their OCD to pans or pandas. because then they can say, well, this wasn't my fault. This was caused by a virus or whatever it is. I don't know enough about it to be able to talk about it. But that way, their self-esteem isn't as impacted because they feel like it wasn't their, or that, they didn't take proper precautions or things like that. Instead of being able to, when you are able to pinpoint something, it gives you some sort of control. Okay, categorical self-blame. I hope that you're following this and this isn't boring. It might be, but whatever. Categorical self-blame. This is tough because this is the self-blame that obviously bad things happen to me for no reason. And this turns internal. This turns to almost diving into your character. And I have zero control over anything. And it could reflect on, I'm just a bad person. I deserve this. I must have done something to deserve it. And because I can't pinpoint it, that produces fear moving forward. Therefore, and I put this down, there are studies that confirm that this makes it a negative self-esteem, and that you might adopt the philosophy that one would deserve the negative outcomes because bad things just happen to me. It is very past and character focused, meaning instead of future oriented, like I talked about before, if we can pinpoint something or even take some sort of blame, I can change in the future, right? You can't do that when it comes to categorical self-blame because it just happened to you. There's no explanation. There's no opportunity to control anything in the future, and therefore you feel very vulnerable, and it can turn inward to your character. Okay, so now that you've heard these two things, the excitement about this helps me to understand why it is so many of us can get stuck in this self-esteem misery cycle, because we are taught, and if you've watched my videos, you've heard me say it, and now that I know, I hope that I haven't really caused a lot of hopelessness by saying this, but I do say a lot, don't worry why OCD showed up or what the circumstances were around it. Now, is that still true? Yes, because it is kind of, it's just a wild goose chase. Even if you were to pinpoint why it showed up, or what the circumstances were, or why all the stars aligned, it's still not going to take away your symptoms. So we're still dealing with symptoms with OCD, and that's the main reason why it's important not to focus on that, because we do think, to a degree, if I can find out why this happened, this will resolve the symptoms. This is a really logical way of thinking. But if we look at this through the lens of a health issue, so if someone has heart disease and a doc comes in and pinpoints this heart disease was caused because of your diet, exercise, lack of sleep, stress, whatever, that person will then be able to have a behavioral self-blame where they have some sort of control of why, and now I can change this in the future. If the doc comes back and says, well, it's just genetics, that sucks for you. I mean, still there are things you can do about it, but it might feel a little different because bad things just happen to me, and that could turn inward. Same with OCD. OCD might be genetic. It may have been passed down. We don't know. But if you can't pinpoint that and you just have to go with, I guess it just showed up, that is scary. And I do say that often in my advocacy. It is scary to believe that you're just walking down the road and the lightning bolt of intrusive thoughts can hit you and you're powerless against that. That's a tough place to be. And I hate that. And this is why I want to go into this, to this kind of work, so we don't have to just rely on that, right? But when we're talking about self-esteem, that can harm us even more, because it really does impact how we see ourselves and how we see ourselves in the world, and possibly even how the world sees us. So the whole point of this video is just to shed some light on the information. Now remember, I'm not saying that this is a theory that is proven about OCD, but I think it is very interesting that so many of us struggle with self-esteem. And a lot of the reason why, based on these two concepts, is because we cannot pinpoint why OCD started in the first place. Yes, we can look at the situation, but what keeps us from turning that inward and making the accusations against ourselves that there's a reason because maybe I'm a bad person, and many of us go through that, especially when the themes are taboo, especially when the themes are embarrassing or shameful, then it's a deeper level of that self-esteem. I really must be a bad person to have this just hit out of the blue. I don't have the answers, right? So the point of this video is just to share with you that if you are struggling with self-esteem, this could be a big reason why. I don't have Chrissy's 5 reasons for on how to build your self-esteem, or 5 things, but this may help just a little bit to know it's not your fault. That this is perhaps a theory that can be proven, that because we are lacking specific information, it has a direct impact on how we feel about ourselves. Isn't that exciting? For me, I think that the overriding of this factor, and I've shared this with you before, I'm sure, has really been that building of the self-worth based on connecting with you, based on connecting with others who get it, who understand it, and therefore I know I'm not walking alone, right? Whether it's behavioral or categorical, you feel very isolated and alone because it's still a bad thing that happened to you, OCD showing up, intrusive thoughts. But knowing you're not alone in that can kind of stop that process of the self-esteem taking such a huge dive, because I can say, all you great, awesome people out there experience this too. So that means it is less about my character and who I am, and more about it being an actual disorder that I didn't ask for. Now, damn it all, I wish I knew why. We're still in the neophyte stages of figuring out why OCD shows up, what it means and all that. But I do want you to know that I feel like I'm dedicated to that path, especially when it comes to lived experience, to start to explore some of these things that can help us understand why this isn't our fault. The OCD in itself and the way that we perceive ourselves because of it. I know that this was a little bit different than videos that I do, but I just was so excited to share this with you. Drop a line if you think this makes sense, or this makes you feel wow, or if you have more questions about it, because I'm willing to dig into this to learn more and possibly even do maybe a correlational study. And if you're interested in being part of that, it would be completely anonymous, by the way. Also drop me a line either in the comment section, or you can email me at ocd.chrissie@gmail.com. Anyway, thank you for letting me share my thoughts. As I move forward with this kind of stuff, I am going to share things that I discover that I feel like are really impactful for me and for you, because that is what this is all about. Figuring out step by step how we can deconstruct this life with OCD, because anything can help when it makes more sense to see this isn't your fault. You didn't choose this, and therefore I don't want any of us walking around beating ourselves up for something we didn't cause. So I hope that helps. I appreciate you. I'm going to try to do a Halloween video in a day or so, and I'll see you then. Bye.